Hello. In this paragraph, we're going to talk about how to support your paragraphs. Well-supported paragraphs are the key to writing strong essays, so let's go ahead and get into it and begin with an overview of what makes a strong paragraph. First, the strength of a paragraph depends both on its focus and its support. When I say focus, I mean how clear it is, and when I say support, I mean the strength of its supporting details. Strong paragraphs will always have a clear topic sentence. They will have relevant and adequate support. Relevant means that the supporting details are on topic and that they are timely. They're not from too long ago. And adequate means that there's enough of them. Strong paragraphs will also include transition words. These are words and phrases that help to illustrate the relationship between the different ideas that exist in your paragraph. Are you comparing and contrasting two things? Are you trying to show cause and effect? Are you trying to show illustration or example, etc.? Finally, strong paragraphs include a closing sentence, and what closing sentences do is they either point back to the topic sentence, saying to the reader, hey, think about all those interesting supporting details you just read. Remember that they support my original idea, which I expressed in my topic sentence, or closing sentences can also transition a reader forward or give a reader a clue as to where the ideas in one paragraph are going to shift and be applied in a different context. When we think about the structure of a paragraph, all paragraphs include topic sentences, supporting details, and closing sentences, although the topic sentence doesn't always appear in the first sentence. Most often it does, but it doesn't necessarily have to. When we think about the kind of support that writers include in their paragraphs in order to develop their topic sentences or their ideas, there are a number of different ways that writers do that. Some writers will use anecdotes or stories in order to support or illustrate their topic sentence. Other times, descriptions are appropriate. Specific instances or examples can sometimes demonstrate a point. Expert opinion in the form of testimony or analysis. This is when you bring your quotations in from somebody who's an expert in the topic that you're writing about. Facts, pieces of information that folks generally agree to be true. Statistics, which are numbers or percentages that can represent facts or data. And then finally, reflections. And these are the author's own thoughts, feelings, or ideas about the other support that he or she includes in the writing. So let's move on and take a look at a few examples and see if we can identify what support looks like in a well-developed paragraph. So here we go. It's crucial that states develop better programs for providing children with adequate clothing. When I was 10, my family couldn't afford to buy me winter shoes. Instead, I wore gym shoes as I stood in a foot of snow at the bus stop in winter. Eventually, my feet became frostbitten and I missed school for a week. Worst, I almost lost some of my toes. Well, in this case, we start with a pretty clear topic sentence. The topic sentence is, it is crucial or it is necessary that states have programs to provide kids with clothing. And then the rest of the paragraph uses a story or an anecdote in order to illustrate that that concept is true. So here we have clear topic sentence and we have one kind of supporting detail that holds that topic sentence up. Let's take a look at another example. In this instance, you are going to see both expert testimony and statistics that the writer uses in order to support the topic sentence. Notice as we read this that when the writer is using expert testimony or outside opinion, that a signal phrase is used in order to introduce that opinion. So here we go. The rising amount of student loan debt is a problem that affects all Americans. In an article for Bloomberg, Jenna Schmalek reported that private and federal student loans had reached over $1 trillion by the end of 2014. The burden of this debt has a large impact on the economy. People who are struggling to repay student loans are much less likely to start small businesses or purchase homes. Without consumer spending, unemployment rates will continue to drop. Reducing student loan debt is a necessary step towards strengthening the American economy. So thinking back about our topic sentence, the writer is essentially telling us, hey, student loan debt is a huge problem. And then she is using this article from Bloomberg magazine to support her idea. So here's your expert testimony Notice how she introduces that expert testimony with a signal phrase in an article for Bloomberg. Jenna Schmalak reported. And then we get a little bit of statistic here, where we get the hard numbers that represent the problem. We're proving that debt is a problem because it's over $1 trillion, and that was by 2014. We then get a little bit more expert opinion in this sentence here. People who are struggling to repay student loans are much less likely to start businesses or or purchase a home. And the reason why we know that that's expert opinion is because in this parentheses here, we get the author's name, so we know that it came from someone else. So in this instance, the writer is using both testimony and statistic in order to support her ideas. And we can think about expert testimony fits under the category of ethos, which we've learned about in previous lessons. And that's credibility, right? Somebody's reputation or credibility. And the $1 trillion statistic fits under the category of logos. That's using facts or logic in order to support an argument. So we're going to look at just a few more examples, this time examples that connect a little bit more to the essay topic I'm asking you to write about. So we are beginning with a topic sentence here. The topic sentence is stereotypes and biases are dangerous. But this is probably not the world's best topic sentence. And the reason why is because it's a bit too broad. When we're writing, we want to make sure that our topic sentences give us enough to write about in our paragraphs, but are not too broad, in that we cannot possibly cover the topic in a single paragraph. So a better topic sentence for our purposes would be something like, stereotypes and biases are dangerous because they can lead to violence. Or if we want to flip it so that we have a complex sentence, we can write, because they can lead to violence, stereotypes and biases are dangerous. And so now that we have our topic sentence, we want to see how we can support that topic sentence with supporting details. And in this case, what we're going to do is use some specific example in order to illustrate the idea. Because they can lead to violence, stereotypes and biases are dangerous. Oftentimes, people who hold biases harm others as a result of their prejudices. For example, in 2019, Clifton Blackwell, a 61-year-old male from Milwaukee, threw acid on the face of a Latino man. Blackwell has been accused of assaulting the man after telling him to, quote, go back to his country. According to the New York Times, quote, Blackwell continued to berate the man, calling him an illegal, before splashing him in the face with a bottle of acid. And then we get the author's last name there. So in this case, we've used one specific anecdote or one specific example to help prove that biases can lead to violence. And we've also used a little bit of expert testimony. We're relying on the credibility of the New York Times by including a quote about this situation, which helps us to further develop that explanation. So this is a pretty well-developed paragraph, but I think that we can go a little bit further and find another example, right? If Clifton Blackwell is example number one, let's see if we can pull in a more recent example to help illustrate this idea even more. So rereading the whole paragraph, because they can lead to violence, stereotypes and biases are dangerous. Oftentimes, people who hold biases harm others as a result of their prejudices. For example, in 2019, Clifton Blackwell, a 61-year-old male from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, threw acid on the face of a Latino man. Blackwell has been accused of assaulting the man after telling him to, quote, go back to his country. According to the New York Times, Blackwell continued to berate the man, calling him an illegal, before splashing him in the face with a bottle of acid. In a more recent incident, a 17-year-old man named Kyle Rittenhouse was arrested in Kenosha, Wisconsin, after shooting two people who were attending a Black Lives Matter protest this past summer. Rittenhouse is currently being charged with first-degree homicide. So now what we have is we have two very specific examples that are helping to illustrate that topic sentence. And in example number one, we've also included expert testimony from the New York Times that helps to corroborate that story. Like, hey, we're not just making it up. We read about it in the New York Times. The second example does not do that. However, it's still a well-developed and strong example. To further conclude this paragraph, we want to then close it out by saying something about it. It's not enough for us to just leave those two well-developed pieces of support there, we want to somehow connect that back to our topic sentence. And so we're just going to add a closing sentence, this time at the end, and notice just how the closing sentence mirrors the topic sentence. If our topic sentence reads, because they can lead to violence, stereotypes and biases are dangerous, our closing sentence reads, in both cases, the accused were motivated to harm others as a result of bias and stereotyping. Notice how the word harm and violence are related, and notice how we see the words bias and stereotyping both in the topic sentence and in the closing sentence. Now, this isn't necessary in every paragraph, but we do want to make sure that there is some unity between the ideas that are expressed there. The final thing I want to point out is that when we are writing paragraphs, we want to make sure that we include very clear transition phrases that help to illustrate the relationship between the ideas that are in the sentences. So, looking back at our paragraph, we can see two transition phrases. The first one, for example, and the second one, in a more recent instance, or instance would be the transition word. Both of these transition words indicate to the reader that an example is coming. They mean to illustrate or to give an example. Therefore, the reader is prepared to know that Clifton Blackwell as well as Kyle Rittenhouse are both going to be examples that illustrate the idea of bias and violence. Some common transition words are order of importance words and illustrative words. These are probably the kinds of words you will use most often in your writing. Order of importance just refers to the way in which you're organizing your ideas, like, right? So my first idea is this, my second idea is that, my third idea. So you can use first, second, and third. You can use next, last, finally. And those words are usually, are oftentimes used to introduce paragraphs or to introduce major supporting details inside of a paragraph. Your illustrative transition words are used to give examples. These are words like for instance, for example, specifically, to illustrate, or an illustration is, or an illustration of. Let's take a look at one final paragraph and see how we employ these common transition words in that paragraph. We're going to return to our topic of bias. This time we're going to give a different paragraph though. I'm going to read it through and I want you to just pay attention to both the topic sentence and the closing sentence, but also the way in which the transition words help to organize the ideas that are in the essay, or in the paragraph, excuse me. Bias and prejudice are often caused by a variety of factors. First, a person's upbringing may cause them to become prejudiced. For example, if parents had prejudices of their own, there is a chance that these opinions will be passed on to the next generation. Next, racial, political, or religious isolation can lead to prejudice. To illustrate, when a person only socializes with individuals who share his or her identity, it increases the probability that biases will be reinforced. Last, biases and prejudices are encouraged by the media and Hollywood. In her essay, How the New Aladdin Stacks Up Against a Century of Hollywood Stereotyping, Evelyn Al-Sultani argues that Middle Eastern characters are often stereotyped in films. Specifically, Al-Sultani writes, quote, after 9/11, a spate of films also emerged that rehash many of the old terrorist tropes. There is no single cause of biases and prejudices, but there are steps that people can take to unlearn biased and prejudiced ideas. Okay, so here we go. We have first, which introduces our first major supporting detail, right? People learn bias in the home or because of their upbringing. And then we have an example that helps to explain that. Then we have the word next. Next gives us a second cause of bias or prejudice, racial, political, or religious isolation. And then it gives an example of it. Then we have last, that biases are encouraged by the media in Hollywood. And then we have a little bit of a longer example that comes to illustrate that. Notice too how the topic sentence, bias and prejudices are caused by a variety of factors. Our first, next, and last introduce each one of those factors, and then our for example, to illustrate and specifically help to explain those examples. Notice too that the closing sentence helps not only to reinforce the topic sentence, but also points to a transition or a way forward. We as readers have a sense of where this essay is going to go next. So, as you begin working on your own composition for this class, you may want to review the video and think about how you can write strong supporting paragraphs that include clear topic sentences, supporting details, closing sentences, and transitions that help to illustrate the relationship between ideas.